The market gapped lower this morning and trended down all the way to the 6,200 level before bouncing into the market close. S&P was down 0.79%, closing at 6229.98. From our point of view, the 6,200 level is going to be a key level for intra-week support. If this breaks, we could see further downside as low as the 6,100 level. In prior weeks, we saw resistance building just below the 6,200 level before finally breaking out over the last few trading sessions of last week. So we'd like to see this hold in terms of bullish momentum continuing, but if that does break, it is possible we could see some bearish momentum throughout this week. Taking a step back on our daily candlestick chart, we can see gamma exposure is still skewed positively, but this is the second day in a row where we're seeing large gamma exposure on a 0 DTE basis rolling off. We saw that on Thursday's trading session, and we're seeing it again in today's trading session. Today, of course, it's negative gamma exposure that's rolling off, so we could see a little bit of a gap up tomorrow morning potentially, and so the key is whether that gap up gets sold or not. As I was mentioning, the possibility of a sell-off into the 6,100 level would bring us right back into this previous resistance that we saw earlier in the year. We have since broken out over the past week to week and a half of trading, a big momentum breakout above that resistance level. So a retest of this 6,100 to 6,150 level would not be surprising to see as investors take profits. Looking forward through the end of the year, as long as we continue to see positive skew in the gamma exposure data, we will view this as a buy the dip scenario. We're still in positive gamma exposure territory. And so until we see a sustained move into negative gamma exposure territory, we're going to view this as a buy the dip event.
Thanks, Anthony. Let's take a look at IWM. IWM today saw a very sharp decrease in GEX all the way into negative territory, a negative 162.8 million. IWM has spent a lot of its time recently in negative GEX territory. And I mentioned last week that this big increase into positive territory in the past for IWM has recently marked turning points back down. So a contrarian signal shown by IWM's large increase in positive GEX. So it's too early to say if this decrease in GEX means that we're headed south again, but it is something to watch. Just as you were observing, I do see an overall positive picture. We have the Keltner channels angled higher. We have GEX at higher levels, including at the 230 strike, which is the most prominent. But there are a few concerning signs. For one, we close at 219.73. That happens to be 9 cents below the whole moving average at 219.82. I'm not as convinced by moves that start out above the hole and then close just slightly below. We've seen in the past when that happens that it can sometimes be a little bit of a bear trap. But tomorrow may be telling. If we start out with a gap below this line, which we actually did see with QQQ, and we'll take a look at that momentarily, that could signal that IWM is destined to head toward this 210 GEX cluster on the lower end. So we'll want to be watching this. If it can somehow retake and hold above the hole, the distance is narrowing between the hole and the upper Keltner channel, and that's not leaving a lot of room statistically for IWM to make a sustained move to a much higher level. But we do see this GEX at 230. I tend to think it's going to come into play a little bit later on because most of the GEX, when you look at our 3D graph, that GEX is scattered across a variety of dates, mostly later on. I'd like to see more time pass so these Keltners eventually catch up with where we see that positive GEX.
Thanks, Sean. I wanted to take a look at GLD, the gold ETF. GLD has been a huge mover since last year, big uptrend. We've seen over the last few weeks, GLD has gone from basically an all-time high, pulling back, and over the past week, we've actually seen two individual tags of this 50-day EMA. Both times we have bounced right off of that level, including today. So it's actually a bigger move than what it looks like here by the numbers. GLD showing only up 0.07% today, but we were actually down over 1% earlier in the session and coming all the way back up to close just slightly positive. When we look at the gamma exposure data, however, we see a continuation of interest at higher strikes. We're seeing continued volume in the options market. We annotate volume through these blue bars and gamma exposure data through our purple bars. And you can see basically from this level onwards, we're seeing skew to the upside in both volume and in gamma exposure. We've been trading GLD a lot over the past year, and in our opinion, this 50-day EMA will continue to hold as it has over the course of the last year to year and a half. And so we think this is a pretty solid risk reward ratio. You could put stops just below the 300 strike, below these recent lows. However, gamma exposure pointing to the upside. So this looks like probabilities are increasing for a move at least back to previous highs up here in the 315 to 320 zone. We have a weekly income strategy using GLD as a vehicle as part of our portfolio, which, by the way, you can track our trades in real time by becoming a member at geeksoffinance.com. I'll also put a link to our community Discord where you could see some of our previous trades, both intraday and larger portfolio trades. Take a look at that when you get a chance. I'll put links in the description below to both of those for you guys to check out.
Now let's take a look at QQQ. QQQ also saw a large decrease in GEX, but it's not yet to the negative side of things. We're still actually positive at 125.2 million net positive GEX for QQQ. Now, if we look at the data graph, this gives us a view of net GEX at each strike, and we can see 560 is a large strike on the positive side. We also have 565 and 570. So while 560 may be a target, given that it's the biggest positive GEX cluster we see on the map, if we did reach 560, we would want to see strikes increase above 560 instead of this descending sort of pattern. And on the downside, we see 500 as a large negative cluster. If we take a look at the chart, we see this bullish ascending pattern with the Keltner channel, similar to IWM. We also see that QQQ actually has what I would consider a little bit more definitive break below the whole moving average, with this gap below, a test above, and fail. And so we're still only about 0.5% below the 554 hull, but it is enough to give me concern that we might be at the beginning of this drop that we've been awaiting for some time. So with QQQ below the hull at 554.06, QQQ is currently a little more than 2 points below at 552. It may be a sign that QQQ is beginning a drop that we've been anticipating for a short time, and we'll want to see if this is the beginning, if we're going to stop at 540, 520, or maybe head toward these lower GEX clusters.
Thanks, Sean. Next, let's take a look at Palantir. Palantir up 3.54% today, closing at 139.12. Pretty big update for Palantir despite the weakness and the sea of red we saw throughout the market today. Palantir bouncing off of this dip right down into the 130 strike. Pretty significant dip between 150 and 130 over the course of the last couple of weeks. We mentioned this in last night's video. We do have a position in Palantir. We actually bought the 135, 145 call debit spreads. So far, we are in the money on those 135 calls, so looking pretty solid. I'm looking for a move potentially through this 140 level to exit the position. Gamma exposure is largest at the 140 strike. You can see all the volume that came in today in the options market. We've been seeing that regularly over the last several trading sessions, just giving further incentive for this bounce in the underlying shares to materialize. We're also seeing gamma exposure growing at some of these higher strikes, so that's something we want to pay attention to for a potential continuation move through the 140 level, potentially into 145 and 150. So it was a really nice move today. We'll see if Palantir can hang on through this week to make it up through that 140 strike. So we're going to be monitoring this, of course, intraday using our real-time GEX platform.
Thanks, Anthony. Let's take a look at CLF, which is a domestic steel producer. Obviously, domestic steel is one of the focal points of this administration. And so when we saw what we felt was a good GEX setup with this stock, we definitely jumped in. And recently, we actually took profits on CLF. So you can see I have our Discord server pulled up. And on Thursday, we locked in $5,635 profit. This was as CLF was reaching the upper Keltner channel, and it had also reached the largest GEX cluster that we were watching overhead. So we almost reached 9. We almost top ticked our exit. We don't always sell at the exact top, but we had some good timing with this one. And I wanted to take a quick look at the stock now. We also see almost just as much at 10 now, which is a good sign. And we did see a pullback today, almost 4%. And what I'm watching is these Keltner channels, which are now pointing a little bit more sharply upward. That brings 10 more into focus, not just from a GEX target perspective, but technically the Keltners pointing upward will give us more room to meet that target and still at that time, hypothetically be within the channel. We also see the whole sharply rising. I want to see what happens at 819. Ideally, if we could re-enter again on a dip towards 8 and see that recover to maintain the whole moving average, that would validate a bullish view and that the stock might be headed toward 10 next. So keeping an eye on this, and we're happy to take profits on Thursday.
And for a limited time, you can get $300 off our yearly portfolio manager tier subscription. Use code SUMMER2025 at checkout. We've got a few spots remaining in this limited time offer, so take advantage of it while you can. Members get full access to our gamma exposure dashboard, our option flow analytics tools, as well as our algorithmic trading strategies. And you'll also get access to the premium channels in our community Discord. We've got a ton of great traders in there sharing their own trade setups and strategies, and you can also track our trades in real time as we trade our options portfolio. I'll put links in the description below for all of that so you guys can check it out. Thanks so much everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.